At this point, I've set up all the colors I think I might need to do my painting. I've pretty much put the full rainbow on my palette, missing just a couple of colors that aren't really relevant to my painting. And at this point, I'm going to start applying local color. And what I mean by that is generalized areas of color. We see these bushes as being mostly green, maybe with a bit of yellow ochre in them. These rocks are mostly kind of a ochre, brownish color. These hills back here and this water, mostly different types of blues. The sky, blue and white. So, like an apple, we might see it as having many colors in it, like greens and reds and yellows and oranges. But if overall we see it has red in there, we'd say the local color for that apple is red. So we're talking about very simplified, generalized areas of color. This is something I should execute rather quickly. So I'm also going to paint just a little bit thicker at this point, just to kind of cover up some of the loose marks that I've made. And I often find with this that it's easiest or most successful to work from background to foreground. And the reason that it is because I can paint this stuff that's going to go here behind this mountain and not really worry too much about going over the rocks, because I'm just going to paint the rocks on top of it later on. If you start to lose a line or something that you need to see later on, you could wipe it out. Don't do what I just did. Try to use a rag. Try not to use your fingers for manipulating paint. You don't want to get that stuff into your bloodstream. It's just kind of a bad habit. And still keeping it quite light and loose. There's no need to really dig in right now. We still might make mistakes or make things we want to change. This is still, practically a drawing layer, right? We're just kind of figuring out these general areas of color. I'm going to lighten up this bits of sky I just painted in here. Because if we get closer to the horizon, that sky is going to get lighter. We're going to lose contrast. At this point, too, there's areas of white. I'm going to paint them in white. Using that same cobalt blue for the water. And I'm refraining from getting closer, right? I'm going to keep moving each of these steps, getting closer and closer until I do this rock over here, and then the foreground I'm going to do last. Working in this really organized sort of manner, make sure that I'm not overworking one area while ignoring some others. Everything kind of gets worked up in kind of the same pace, and keeps me from having to remix my colors. I'm starting these cooler colors from my background, and the colors are getting warmer, more saturated, and higher contrast as I get closer to the foreground. So it keeps my palette really organized. I don't have to remix colors constantly. If you're not really sure which colors to put in, just do your best. Just sort of, if you think you see a color, put it in. Feel free to be playful with your color choices. A lot of times, the shadows are going to be cooler. So you can add a little bit of blues in there if you feel you see them, or purples. Black and yellow can make a really wonderful color for your shadows as well. Makes it really kind of, especially if you're doing tropical scenes, it's a very useful color to have. We might not get the colors right at this point, and that's fine. Just trying to be really general with our choices. And get close. We'll get it right later on. Each layer we get more and more specific and defined. When dealing with foliage, there's usually much more than one type of green in there. If you look at any tree, there's going to be leaves that are living and dead and ones that are in sunlight and shadow. So to paint foliage, use a variety of different colors. Bring in some greens and yellows. Bring some maybe even reds or browns. There's probably some grays in there. Don't be shy with your colors when you're painting leaves. Finally, now switching to a smaller brush. As I finish up the last bits of this painting, I'm coming right up next to the foreground. Atmospheric perspective should be generally working. The white of the canvas is totally hidden. So any white that you see has now a fresh layer of white that I have applied on top of it. So we're starting to build up a surface, although it's just a very thin skin at this point. If you have any trouble painting trees, break them up into a few different values. Right? There's usually a part in shadow, usually in the interior or lower part of the tree. Find where the midtones are, and then I usually paint the highlights, right? The shadow is usually like in the inner part of the tree. So you can usually start with that first, and then paint your midtones and highlights. The leaves that are on the outside of the tree are usually being lit. So I can usually paint those last. Just really letting my brush sort of dance over the surface. And there we go. Local color. Gonna let this dry before I move on to the next step.